Get away from the field, Huggins. And Chrissy Rum will have the ball. Stephanie is trying to get Janelle down here. Chrissy is trying to get the ball back down there. Woof! Janelle comes in with the big swing. That big, tough horse of hers is trying to get all over Chrissy. Stephanie's trying to hold off Janelle. Chrissy's trying to get the ball down. Trying to get the ball down to Heather Shuttles. Chrissy passed.
First we'll watch the blue number 2, who's farthest to the left of the screen. And when her team is bringing the ball out or has the ball in the end zone wanting to come out, she shouldn't be marking up a person yet. She should be trying to get clear, giving her teammate the option of passing it to her. But once it's out and her ball carrier's behind her, she should be taking off a player like she is by just staying up against that player on one side. And evidently that's what she's doing. She's off the screen, but her ball carrier shouldn't have any problem dealing with one player. So assume our number 2 is doing the right thing, even though they're off the screen. And as our player gets up there, we can see that she gave up that player and is now doing the wrong thing by moving toward her ball carrier to mark up a player. So she's still doing the wrong thing, still moving toward her ball carrier. But right about here, it wouldn't be wrong if she would check up actually a few steps before she is now. So she was getting closer to the ball carrier to be available for a pass rather than marking up a player. So if she had checked up and it only appeared that she is moving toward the ball carrier because that other player was heading over there, if she was going over toward the ball carrier but not to mark up another player, but just to be closer to be clear for a pass, that would have been all right. Okay, right here her ball carrier turns away, and if she would go to mark up the player that is behind her, she would be doing correct. But to go toward her ball carrier to mark up a player is not correct. And so when the ball carrier turns back around, now it's more obvious that she should be going after the player to her right. And if she does that, that would be correct. But coming back towards the player that is by the ball carrier would not be correct. And it looks like she does, for a second, do kind of what she's supposed to be. She wasn't standing very close to that player, but was up against them, facing the way she was supposed to go, and kind of up against, or pretty close to that opposing player, which cleared this side of the field for the ball carrier from that player, and the ball carrier would only have to deal with one player. But here she leaves that player to go toward her ball carrier to mark up a player, which is wrong. Okay, she's obviously going towards that ball carrier to mark up a player, still going towards the ball carrier, so it's still wrong. Still wrong. And then after she gets in a position where she can angle away from the ball carrier to mark up a player, now it's correct. And she's getting kind of in front of her ball carrier, so her ball carrier would be behind her, and she should be just staying on one side of that player that she's up against now, just holding them and clearing one side of the field for her ball carrier. So she was doing the correct thing for a second, but it looks like she's given up, or she has let that player get past her and start heading toward the ball carrier. Now for her to continue marking that player up right now, that would be wrong. And when a player you're defending gets away from you, where you'd have to be going towards your ball carrier to defend that player, usually the thing to do is just stop where you are facing downfield. And now that her ball carrier stepped away and she's able to move away from her ball carrier, now she's kind of in the correct position up against that player. It'd be better if she were facing still downfield, but as long as she keeps this side of the field open for her ball carrier, she would be doing the correct thing. And she pretty much holds that player then until she gets the ball thrown in. Okay, now we'll talk about the blue number 3, bringing the ball. She's taking a penalty throw from within the area. And once she gets possession of it, we'll start counting what she does. Okay, here she's gotten possession, and it looks like she is electing to put herself between those two black players. Instead of grabbing that ball and checking up, so the black player in front of her, who's the number 3, who's heading for the number 1, letting that player go past and just turning away from that player coming up on her stick side would have been more appropriate. She just needs to realize that she's taking a risk not having an outlet, not having a way to turn away from that player once she gets within reach of a racket. But she gets past that player that was on her left side, and she does stay out of reach of the player coming up on her racket side. Once she decides to make a turn, now here she turns toward that player, but when she turned toward that player, there was well over a horse length between, so that was all right. Here she keeps that player on her non-stick side. That's okay. And she shouldn't feel under any pressure with just that one player on her moving the ball down the field. Now, here where she's coming up to some more traffic, which she shouldn't have been doing because her other players shouldn't have been involved in that traffic that was coming in front of her, like to meet her. But she turns away from pressure, and that's appropriate. And when she turns away, she would have been better off by taking even a stride or two back up the field, so when she turned back around, she wouldn't have had her racket within reach of this black player coming up the field. And if she had gone upfield, directly upfield, and that black player came up on her stick side, would be the time to either turn away from her, or if the other player was on her left side, she should have her spare player back in front, and she'd put the ball out there to her spare player out in the clear, and the entire other team would be behind the play and running or facing the wrong direction. Here she turns away again. That's very appropriate. And when he comes up on the other side, she turns away again. That's very appropriate. So here she gets a little bit of running room and stays out of reach of that player's racket, but in doing so, she puts herself between both black players. Her own player and the black player for a second would have kept her from turning left. Now they pushed away far enough that she could turn left, and she's hasn't turned away from that player on her right soon enough. She's already within reach. That black player on her right is already within reach of her racket. And here she, was still within reach of her racket again, and turned toward that player to get away, which is isn't illegal in this instance, but it's not a good idea or not a good habit to get in to turn toward a player unless there's at least a horse length distance between you. And so she stays out of the way and keeps away from the other defender until she gets the pass off into the area.
Play on. Paige throws it back to Renee, which is a very nice play. You don't have to make your 10-yard throw the direction to travel at any time you go in any direction. Renee gives a head check, says go to the right. I think Paige missed it. There she goes. Paige finally gets open.
Okay, first we're going to watch this red player that's farthest to the left of the screen. She just received a pass for the 10-yard throw. She stayed back away from everybody, which is a pretty good plan, and was open for a pass, and they passed it to her. Now here she turns toward somebody, which is wrong because there wasn't, well, she actually gets within reach of their racket, but so turning toward them was wrong to get past this player. And she carries on down the field, and as she gets to this next player, she may have been within reach of the racket there, which is wrong. She turned away a little bit and then turned back toward that player. This time when she turned toward the player, there was plenty of room between them. So that time turning toward the player was not incorrect. And then she just keeps the player on her non-stick side, which is fine, breaks that in front, and gets the pass off into her number one. Okay, now we'll watch the other red player who is farthest from the camera, kind of at the top of the screen or closest to the top of the screen. And her teammate was just taking a penalty throw. So when they were taking a penalty throw, she should have been trying to get clear for a pass and stay away from the middle. I don't know if she was trying to get clear or not, but she had another teammate that was clear, so that's okay. Once her teammate has the ball now, she should, and she is in front of the ball carrier, she should get up against a player on one side and just stay on that one side. And she can get up against that player that she's already next to and stay on the side that she is next to. She should just be flat up against them, not forward or back, and just leaving that left side of the field open for the ball carrier to come by if she wants to. So as the player she's defending moves toward her ball carrier, she should not continue riding toward her ball carrier to mark up that player. And then not only was she moving toward her ball carrier to mark up that player, she overrode that player and quit marking it up and quit preventing that player from getting toward the left side of the field. So here, when that player now takes off toward the ball carrier again, would be appropriate for picking her up and staying between, keeping that player that's on her left, keeping herself between that player and her ball carrier, and she can do that by angling away from her ball carrier, so it would be appropriate to do. But she failed to hold herself between her and the ball carrier. Then she started running kind of toward her ball carrier. Now she's angling away from her ball carrier, so that's okay. And all she needs to do is stay flat up against that player, since now she's gotten in front of her ball carrier to protect that side of the field. But she's has quit being flat up against them and is about to let them head toward the ball carrier. And here, in order for her to mark up that player, she is moving toward her ball carrier, which is incorrect.
She puts it out 10 yards. She didn't handle it the first time. Manages to come back up with it. Still a little slick down there. Tally's looking to get open. She's looking for a teammate to pass it off to her mama. Renee's gets a nice opening. Tally does a great job by holding up two players. Renee's going to make a race down there to pay.
Okay, first we'll watch the red number 2. That's the player in midfield. And her teammate has just got the ball in the end zone, so we'll want to be bringing it down the rest of the field. And her going into the end zone just to be in a better position to get a pass is illegal, and she shouldn't be allowed to play in the end zone like that. But they allow it, and now she should be trying to make herself open for a pass, but staying out of the middle in case her ball carrier wants to continue it. And here the ball carrier passes it to her as she's coming out when she wasn't in a very good position to pass it or receive it. She wasn't under any pressure. The ball carrier wasn't. And the receiver already had someone on her stick side, and her teammate is coming up on their left side where she doesn't have any way to turn away from that player. So if she was making herself available for that pass, perhaps to prevent her ball carrier from making a bounce over the line, the best thing for her to do would have been to throw it right back to her number 3, because she was already under pressure and couldn't on her stick side and couldn't turn away because of her ball carrier, and she could have tossed it back to the number 3 and picked up the ball carrier so that number 3 could have carried it down the field with no pressure. But since she didn't pass it right back, she hangs on the ball. And if she were going to take the ball and carry it herself, not throw it back to that number 3, she shouldn't have exposed her racket to. She shouldn't have got close enough where that person on her could swing at her racket. So the way to not do that, as soon as she catches the pass, is just stop. She could have just stopped. The blue player was in front of her. Let her 3 come on out, pick up the blue player, and then run around behind her number 3. But she gets away from that player then, and then exposes her racket to that player again. Gets back close enough to that player where she did expose her racket, where she could have either just swung farther away from her, going more towards the side of the field to get past her, out of reach of the racket, or possibly even turned completely away from her. But she gets away again, and this time her teammate picks up really all the opposition, and she runs all the way down the field with no opposition and gets the pass off. Now watch the red number 3, who is just now picking up the ball in the area. And when she decides to get past this other player, she turns toward that other player, which is not correct. Then she comes out here and passes it off to her teammate, the number 2 in midfield. There was no pressure on our ball carrier, our number 3 that we're watching, so she shouldn't have thrown it when the ball was in an area of no pressure. She didn't need to throw it. If she were just having bad bounces on that field and was just deciding to throw it to get it across the line rather than bounce it across the line, that would be great. That'd be fine. But she should be ready, since she's throwing it to her teammate that is already under pressure, already has somebody on her stick side. She should be ready to just receive the ball right back. And then when she doesn't receive it right back, she kind of moves toward her ball carrier to mark up a player that's in front of her ball carrier. And then when she passes up her ball carrier, and would be appropriate for her to be moving away from her ball carrier to mark up a player, she overrides that player that she could have marked up. Then after overriding it, she first starts heading toward her ball carrier to mark up that player again. And then once her ball carrier passes her up and it's appropriate for her to mark up that other player, she actually does connect up, get her stop coming down the field, and actually does a good job from that. In fact, I think she was able to keep both of those players from running down the field.
Paige is going to see it. She's got some wicked arms, and she's all by herself right now. And she's going to take her time and slow down before she gets to the 30.
Okay, first we'll talk about the red number 2, and the red number 2 is the red player at the top of the screen or farthest away from the camera. Her number 1 has just picked up the ball, and in order for her to mark up that player that is right next to her right now in this position, she is really going to have to start moving toward her ball carrier. So it's really not appropriate. Now, her ball carrier is speeding up and is going to be out of the way, so it's not that bad, but it is different than what the book would say. And if she doesn't get that player next to her, she could check back and pick up the either one of those other blue players, because she could pick one of them up without angling, without moving toward her ball carrier. So now here, where in order for her to connect with that player next to her, she would have to be angling away from her ball carrier. Now it's okay. Now she can go ahead and mark up that ball carrier. Since her ball carrier is in front of her in the field, she wants to get herself completely between that defender and the ball carrier to keep that defender from getting to her ball carrier. In this case, it happens to be the 3, that's just kind of like gravy. If it happens to be the 3 you're able to catch. And she does connect, maybe not quite as forward as she should, and then that player starts getting away from her. And when that player starts getting away from her, it is appropriate for her to check back and not continue chasing her, because now she'd have to be moving toward her ball carrier. But just that little bit of riding off that she did was actually very helpful to her team. Slowing up the opposing number 3 that much gave her team's number 1 plenty of time to get down there and make a goal, even maybe enough time to even miss the bounce and come back to it and still get to it, make a goal before that 3 catches up and gets into the play. Now we'll watch the red number 3, who's not on the screen yet. And there she comes onto the screen. That's the red number 3 farthest to the left of the screen. And her number 1 farthest to the right of the screen has just picked up the ball and is headed for the goal. And her number 2, the red number 2, is riding off the opposing number 3. So it, from this position that our number 3 is in, it would be appropriate for her to go after either one of the other blue players, because she can go towards them to mark them up and be angling away from her ball carrier. And she does head for the one of those players. She actually picks up the one that was heading closer to her ball carrier, so she picked up the correct one. And since her ball carrier is in front of her what she should do is position herself between that defender and her ball carrier. And she does connect up with that ball carrier and gets between them and holds them off the rest of the play.
Stephanie gets the ball out of the lineup. She's going to say, come on, Heather. Get your horse moving. Livy's going to get on top of Heather. Stephanie's going to check that big chestnut horse.
Okay, first we'll talk about the blue number 2. And she's just snagged it out of the lineup and had turned out and then turns right, continues turning around and goes right through the other black players, exposing her racket, her ball to some opposing rackets. Which it would have been better if she would just, as she was turning out, just continue running away from that pack and circling around the back of the pack. But she gets away from them and is out front for without any pressure up until she needs to pass it in. Now we talk about the blue number 3. Her number 2 is just snagged in the lineup. She was turning out, and I guess it started turning early, so she was doing good. Now that her team has it, she wants to mark up another player, but she would have to be going toward her ball carrier to mark up any of those players, so she should just hang out away from the pack, being available for a pass. So now her teammate has started down the field and is away from the pack, but still she would have to go toward her ball carrier to mark up 2 of those black players. Now the black player that's over by standing by the umpire in the orange shirt, that player she could go to mark up him and be angling away from her ball carrier, so it would be appropriate for her to go and pick up that player. And she's off the screen, and both those players are off the screen, so maybe she's riding him off. And here they come on the screen, and sure enough, she did go over to that player and rode him off, and stayed with him all the way up to the time when the ball went into the area.
Goes in, down the middle. Stephanie comes up with the ball again. She is doing fantastic, even though she's wearing her glasses right now.
First we'll watch the blue number 2, and she snagged the ball out of the lineup, and then once again, instead of turning out away from the pack, she elects to go through the pack toward her end of the field. This time she does have her own player on her stick side, so it's not so bad if she and her own player that's on her stick side stay together. But as you can see, it was the number 1 that was on her stick side, and the number 1 wasn't going to wait around on her to carry the ball down the field. She's going to go on to their area, which left our ball carrier, the blue number 2, with somebody on their left side where they couldn't turn away, and somebody coming up on their stick side. And she could have avoided all this pressure by passing it over to that blue player to her left, who's standing out away from the pack like they're supposed to be doing, being available for a pass. But she hangs on to the ball, finally turns away from that player, but had already exposed her racket to him, but did hang on to the ball. And then right here, she had her teammate protecting the left side of the field, and her number 1 is headed toward the left side of the field, so it would probably have been wiser to continue over to the left side of the field rather than cutting back to the right and putting herself between 2 black players again. And as they're coming up, she's under some pressure, but she does get the pass off like she wanted to. Okay, now we'll watch the blue number 3. Her number 2 has just caught it in the lineup, and she's turned out like she's supposed to be. And she would have to be moving toward her ball carrier to mark up any of those players. So what she should do is just hang out there away from the pack, available for a pass. And still she's doing correct, hanging out there away where she is available, and the ball carrier really had plenty of pressure to throw it to her. But now that she's passed up the ball carrier, now she can go toward one of those other players to mark them up without moving toward the ball carrier. So it would be appropriate for her now to go mark up one of those other players. And it looks like she's picked that player farthest down the field, which is fine. She should just, since her ball carrier is behind her, she should just get on one side of that player, opening up the other side. So she should get on that player's left, opening up the left side of the field for her ball carrier to carry the ball down safely. And that looks like what she's doing. Then here, where the ball carrier elects not to go on that side, and the player we're watching, the blue number 3, would have to move toward her ball carrier to mark up a player. She should not mark up that player. Looks like she's already headed that way a little bit, but what she should be doing, she should have done, is just stop and stayed back there where the other player started moving away from her. But even now, it'd be better for her to hang out away from the pack, available for a pass, rather than run up there and getting in the pack to mark up that player.
Oh, watch out, they're turning on the ball there. Oh, good play by Stephanie.
Okay, first we'll watch the blue number 2, who is just picking up the ball off the ground right now. When she picks up the ball, she's right in between 2 black players, and she has one of her teammates away from her clear of those players that's putting pressure on her, and available for a pass. And so the appropriate thing to do here would be to pass it to that player, and that's exactly what she does. So there's the pass. She's throwing it pretty much right to her. Threw it in a good place where you would expect her to catch it, but as you can tell, she didn't catch it. And for all y'all that have read the book, you know that I promote passing it beyond and in front of the intended receiver, rather than passing it directly to their racket where they would catch it on a bounce and move away from the opposing players to go get it after it's bounced. Just because I think it is a higher percentage possession than passing it directly to the racket like happened this time. Okay, we'll watch the number 3 in this, the blue number 3 in this play, who is farthest to the left of the screen. And her number 2 has just picked it up in front of her. And in the position she's in right now, it would be appropriate for her to go angle away to the left, to her left, to pick up that one black player in the back, but it would not be appropriate for her to go after either of the other black players, because that would make her going toward her ball carrier. So she could either go to pick up that player over on her left, or she could just hang out away from the pack but close enough where she could be available for a pass. And doesn't look like she's racing up to get after that other player. And of course that ball carrier then throws the ball off, and the player that we're watching is out of the screen the rest of this play.
We've got time on. We've got to throw in. It's off to the black side. And Daniel Johnson reaches down, picks it up for the black team, headed up to the top of the hill. And Zach is being slowed down. Daniel turns away from pressure. A little too late, but he still hung on to the ball. Pressure again. Oh, he tries to throw it out right home.
Okay, we're going to watch the black number 2, and he has just picked up the ball. He's got an orange player. I think they both might be on his right side. And he's heading away from the direction he wants to go. He wants to score. His team wants to score up on the left side of the screen, towards the left side of the screen. And he's out in front, so he's not in any danger right now, and he has lots of options. He's got a player out there waiting for a pass that's by themselves, or he can just kind of angle a little bit left away from those players and stay away from them for a while until the play or the arrangements of the players on the fields change, and he might have to do something else. So he elects to kind of angle away from those first 2 players, and now he's still got a player over to his right, a spare player with nobody on him, and now the area to his left has pretty much opened up, where if he wanted to turn away from that person coming up on his stick side, he probably could, if he's careful that he does it without turning in front of this orange player on the Palomino horse. But he's waited too long to do whatever he's going to do. That orange player is already within reach of his racket, and whatever evasive move he was going to make, he should have made it before he got within reach of the racket. So here he does decide to turn left, and he starts a gradual turn. Still was within reach of the guy's racket, so he's late making his turn. But when he made his turn, I think he made it and turned well enough that he didn't cross in front of the orange player on the Palomino horse. I think there's plenty of room that the orange player on the Palomino horse didn't have to change his speed or direction to avoid a collision. So then he's now getting that orange player on the Palomino horse coming after his on his racket side, and he's waited too long to evade him again. He's already within reach of his racket. As he was turning, he could have thrown to the black player over there by himself before either of these orange players got within reach of his racket. But whatever he's going to do, he should have done it before they got within reach of the racket. And other than that, he could just turn a little bit more left, just angled more left to stay out of reach of that orange number 1's racket. So here he finally decides to pass it off, I guess, to the black player that's out there. He's getting pretty close to the 30-yard line, where that player is the 3. There, the black number 1 is on a white horse, and he's not on the screen yet. But whoever he is throwing it to, he's throwing behind him, and you can throw it safely over a player that's behind you like that, but you actually have to throw it above the reach of their racket, which he didn't do. And at the time he decides to finally throw it, he didn't have to anymore, because the other orange player has given up his left side, and he could have just go ahead and turned away from that player on his right side and been free to do whatever he wanted. Okay, now we'll watch the black number 3. Now his player, his number 2 has just picked up the ball, and in order for him to mark anybody up, he would have to be move toward his ball carrier. So what he should do is just hang out away from the pack, being available for a pass. And it looks like that's what he's doing. The only thing that I would suggest he do different is not try to be upfield or even with the ball carrier down the field. I prefer that they be either even with or behind the ball carrier. So if they puts a pass out his direction, it comes in front of him and he moves toward it to pick it up, rather than the potential of it being behind him, where either he's to reach behind or turn around and try to get it. But other than that, he's doing just what he's supposed to be doing. And then I'm sure when his ball carrier threw it, he intended it for him. It just almost got intercepted, and the other team got it.
He throws it out there, right to Braxton's racket, and Braxton.
First, we'll show the black number 3, who's just caught the pass. And he was supposed to get, when his teammates taking a penalty throw, he's supposed to be getting clear for the pass, and he did that, caught the pass, and then there's really no one defending him to carry it down the field to his number 1. But here he does something even better than just carrying it down there. He gets up against their number 3 and pushes her a little bit, slowing her down even more to get up to bother the black number 1. And he just continues riding her off until he throws the ball into his number 1.
I think. So they give it a throw. Oh no, there's a 3. Flips it right to Daniel. Daniel tries to flip it back, but it goes over to Braxton's head. And now the 2s are going to fight for it. Daniel flips in there and picks it up. Flips it back to the 3 this time, like he was supposed to last time. Braxton carrying it down the field. Wanted to get a connection into Zach. Rachel Gaylor doesn't want Zach to even get in the end zone. Their black shirt and their orange shirts all around Braxton. He's looking for some help.
Okay, we'll watch the black number 2. Of course, his player's bringing it out of the end zone, and his job is to be trying to be clear for a pass, and it looks like he is pretty clear for a pass. So he gets the pass, and then he's going to be passing it right back. Now, he's not under pressure yet, but he does have a player coming up, another player coming up on his stick side. But it's not a bad plan to pass it right back, even though he has, the person he's passing it to has someone on his stick side. If he would throw it off to that person's left, he could turn away from that player to catch it and continue on without being in any problem. So when he throws it back, it's a little bit out of reach of his player. Now it's a loose ball situation, and in a loose ball situation, the player we're supposed to be watching is supposed to go all out to make sure that orange player next to him does not pick it up, and he does that by jumping out and picking it up himself, and then he passes it back again. This time his player that he was passing it to was completely out of pressure, not under pressure, and him, the black number 2 that we're watching, was, if he had carried the ball, would have still had to get it past 2 orange players. So now our black number 2 is kind of off the screen for a while, but he would have to be going toward his ball carrier to mark up any of those orange players. So what he should be doing is hanging back, being available for a pass. And you see he's not on the screen yet, so he's pretty far back, probably much further back than would be desirable. Finally, when he comes on the screen, he's still kind of far back, but even that far back isn't too far for his player to throw it, his ball carrier to throw it behind the ball carrier, but still in front of our black number 2. Even if it's 10 or 15 or even 20 yards in front of him, it should still be a good pass to him, and he should still be able to get to it. But he is a little bit farther back than you'd expect to be available for a pass, and the ball carrier didn't try to pass it to him. And then our black number 2 is indicating he'll take a pass over to his right, but the ball carrier wants to go ahead and throw it on into the end zone. And we'll watch the black number 3 who just threw the pass off. And after he threw the pass off, it was, for a while, it should be like automatic if you throw a pass off when you're being defended, that you just pick up that player next to you. Well, he didn't do that, and then that player got in front of him where he shouldn't go up toward his ball carrier to pick him up anymore, and his ball carrier wanted to throw it back to him. So he's okay there trying to catch this pass. If you look, he's got his racket choked up about 6 inches, and he missed the ball by maybe 2 or 3 inches. So if he had just been holding his racket at the end, that was probably a catchable pass. So once he's missed the pass, now it's actually, once it came out of his ball carrier's racket, it became a loose ball situation, and it's still a loose ball situation. And our number 3 that we're watching is first in line for his team toward the ball. So his job is to go all out toward the ball to prevent that orange player next to him from picking it up. So he does prevent that orange player from picking it up. Now he's not first in line for his team for the ball anymore. So he should be marking up that orange player until he becomes first in line for the ball again. And of course his ball carrier has picked it up now, and he would have to go toward his ball carrier to mark up either one of those players. So once again, being open for a pass is a good thing for him to do. So sure enough, they throw him the pass, and he takes off. So throwing him the pass got the ball out in front of both of those defenders, which was a good thing for the thrower and a good thing for the now ball carrier, that he's out in front of the only 2 people that will be chasing him. So carrying it down the field is not really a problem when there's nobody on him. He realizes there's somebody coming up, and he angles to the right, so that forces that first player to come up to him on his non-stick side, which is where he'd prefer him to be. And then as he comes up, you'll see the ball carrier try to connect with that orange player to keep the orange player from getting forward of him and forcing him to turn. So there he is. He tries to connect right there, and he's not able to hold that number 1, but he is able to prevent that orange player. But he is able to prevent that orange player from getting him turned and stopped from running down the field. Now, he should be aware of the player coming up on his stick side, and he doesn't have like a spare player that we can see on the screen anyhow to throw it to. So there's a couple things he can do to work that out. The first thing would have been if he were able to have connected with that player on his left forward and actually made him bend even more, so that would put both those orange players on his non-stick side. That would have been the easiest thing to do. It doesn't look like he's going to be able to do that. And in order to give time for his spare player to get close enough to be open for a good pass, he can delay the danger of that person coming up on his right side by go ahead and angling right, not continuing straight down the field, but angling to the right side of the field. And as he gets to just before he gets to the right side of the field, he should be able to stay out of reach of the player coming up on his right, and that will have given his spare player much more time to get closer where he would be more available for a pass. But he doesn't do either one of those things and ends up in this position where some people may have called him for center lining when he's trying to avoid this player coming up on his right, but he doesn't get called for it, but he is in a very lot of pressure situation. A lot of pressure has just been put on him. But he's able to avoid that pressure, causing the player on his right to override, and now he's got both the players on his non-stick side. So he's kind of safe now and has more time. And another reason he had to take time in midfield was because his number one is being held out and isn't upfield and ready for a pass. So he's got both the players on his non-stick side for a second, and then as the other one is threatening to come to his stick side, his spare player comes onto the screen, and I don't know if you saw, but his spare player will be signaling that he's available to pass it off to the spare player's right, over the right side of the white horse and those players between them. That's what he's signaling. And kind of at the same time, his number one gets a break to go ahead and get on into the end zone. So he elects, the spare player's there and available for a pass, and it would be okay to pass it to him, but he elects to lob it out in front of his number one, go ahead and put it on the end zone where hopefully his number one can score. And that's fine, but playing with the spare player like that being available just gave the ball carrier an additional option of getting the ball down the field.
There's the throw into Daniel's racket. He flips it back for Zach, but they don't make a good connection. It's down.
Okay, first we'll watch the black number two. He had snagged the ball out of the lineup. His number one had gone around the front like he was supposed to, and he flips it out there for his number one. It looks like it was a good pass, but they don't connect on it. And the ball ends up, I think, going out of bounds. Once he has passed it off, if his player catches it, he should hang out and not go toward his ball carrier to ride up those orange player. If he misses it, he should go up and get mark up that orange player in front of him in case his player misses it, and he'd be then first to the ball and already be riding off an orange player. But it looks like it goes out of bounds before he can do anything else about it. So now we'll watch the black number three. The black number two has just snagged the ball out of the lineup, and is looking to pass it to his number 1. Our black number 3 that we're watching would have to go toward that ball carrier to mark up anybody. So he should hang out away from the pack, making himself available for a pass. And it looks like that's what he was doing. Now he's off screen for pretty much the rest of the play until the ball at least goes out of bounds.
Next on the first go-round. Looks like it's stolen out of the end zone by Olivia Udrich on popcorn. And she's left her bounce on the ground. It's loose. Could be no, her teammate's going back for it. The white helmet, number 2, Jennifer Brunel, picked it up for the white helmet. Jennifer carrying it up the field. Carrying it up there. She's going to have to deal with Fulton. She throws it out there. I didn't think it'd be up where Grace could get it, but Grace has turned around. It looks like.
Okay, first we'll watch the white helmet number 2, who is just now on the screen. She's the farthest to the left of the screen right now. Her teammate just got the ball out of the end zone, or in the end zone, so she should be getting herself clear to get a pass coming out of the end zone and staying away from the middle. So once the player missed it, it became a loose ball situation, and she should have been marking up a player towards the ball. As it turned out, nobody else was around, and so she was able to just walk over there and pick it up. Okay, now our team is carrying the ball again, and it happens to be the player we're watching. You can see that her teammate has gotten on the right side of the defender, so if she wants to go down the field without being bothered, she should go to the right side of her player that is protecting that right side for her to go. And she does elect to take that side and go to the protected side of that defender, and she gets past them, and she's coming up on another defender. Now here she's fairly close to the sideline, and she is lined up to take that player on her left side, which that's still okay. But she is close to that sideline, and if she positions herself between that player and the sideline, she's likely to be under pressure by being pushed toward the sideline. So she does position herself between that player and the sideline while she's very close to the sideline, and I assume to the point where she thought she was going to go out, and she throws the ball back into the middle of the field. There wasn't anybody there for her to throw it to, and in order for her number 3 is behind and well behind and marking up another player. The number 1 is ahead and well ahead and being marked up and is really in the end zone. What she could have done is just stopped going forward and stayed in that position, or turned right and faced the side of the field and stopped and given her teammates time to get up there without being under pressure of being pushed out. So her number one is coming back there and actually has a chance to get to the ball. She threw it short of the one where the number one has to come toward the player that was marking up our ball carrier. There's plenty of distance right now, and if she gets toward it and gets out of the way, that's not a problem. But generally, it's more risky to throw it short of a player than to throw it beyond the player. But our player is pretty much out of the rest of this play. Okay, this time I watched the white helmet number 3, who has just picked up the ball in her end zone. She bounces out to herself and then misses her bounce. Once she's missed the ball, actually once she's out of her racket, bounced it, it's a loose ball situation, and she should be, until she passed it up, she would have been first in line for it. And she did keep that player beside her from picking up, so she did her job. Even though she missed her bounce, she did her job by making an opposing player, pass it up. And now she should mark up a player until she's first in line for the ball again. So she does turn around. She is positioned well enough between the ball and a defender, so she's still doing her job, but she's not first in line for the ball yet. And she waits while her teammate picks up the ball rather than going after the ball at the same time that her teammate was trying for it. But now it's back in her team's racket, and all the players, she would be able to go away from her ball carrier to pick up any of the players. So she should go to mark up a player, and since her ball carrier is behind her, all she has to do is get beside that player, clearing the side of the field for the ball carrier. So she does move down, gets up against a player on one side just exactly like she's supposed to, clearing that side for her player. She got a little bit behind. She should be in, kind of up to the shoulder to keep him from turning toward the ball carrier. And then as the ball carrier passes her up, then she should position herself between the ball carrier and the defender, and she's doing that exactly right. And she continues to hold him up.
We have time on. We've got a throw. In the throw in, it is snagged in the lineup by Jennifer Brunel, the white number 2. Jennifer wanted to get a connection to Grace. Oh, she's getting a little help from Olivia. Olivia taking it. Now Olivia trying to get a connection to Grace. It's up.
I will watch the white helmet number 2, who has just snagged the ball in the lineup. Once you get the ball in a pack, the first thing she should be trying to do is get clear away from the pack to decide how to get down the field. And going forward, keeping all those black helmets on her left side isn't really safe because she's right close to the sideline. So she's better off turning to the right or just standing still until somebody else gets on her. Looks like she decides to take the standing still option, which is fine. She's not under any pressure. She is maintaining possession of the ball without risk, and there's nothing wrong with that. Now when players start coming toward her, she keeps them first on her non-stick side, so still no pressure on her, and then passes it off to another player who is moving away from those players and was a pretty good player to pass it to because she had less pressure on her. Once she got rid of it, she would have to move toward her ball carrier to mark up any player, so she should be hanging out, available for a pass the rest of this play. Now we'll watch the white helmet number 3. And her number 2 has just snagged the ball. She could move away from her ball carrier to mark up either of those black helmets on the left, and that would be the appropriate thing to do. So she's not really going up to mark up another player. It looks like almost undecided about what she should be doing. She is kind of keeping herself between her ball carrier and one defender. And all she really needs to be doing is protecting one side. And right now, she's protecting the inside of the field. So her ball carrier, if she wanted to, could turn left and get past that defender by using our number 3's protection. Now, as a player is coming up toward our ball carrier, it doesn't really affect our number 3's job. She would be doing her job correctly by maintaining up against one side of that black helmet player that's farthest away from the screen, away from the camera. But moving away from the pack is also appropriate. In order to maintain or move back towards that player now, she'd have to be moving toward her ball carrier. So once she's started moving away, turning away like this, she's more correct by wandering away clear for a pass rather than turning back to continue marking up that player. So here she kind of hangs out away and looks for a pass and is clear for a pass, and the ball carrier passes it to her and she catches it. So now I think she stays out of reach of that player's racket beside her and gets out there and gets the pass off.
I guess it's still in play. And Olivia's come up with it again. This time it's staying in a racket. And Olivia coming up at the 30-yard line. Bounce. It came with a pretty good bounce, but she didn't get it on the first go-around. Ball's loose on the ground. And it could be stolen. It is.
Okay, first we'll watch the white helmet number 2. Her number 3 has just gotten the ball in the end zone, so her first job that we can't see her on the screen should be making herself available for a pass over the line. So we still don't see the player we're watching, the number 2. But now the ball, of course it's a loose ball at midfield, and remains a loose ball in midfield for a while. Finally our number 2 comes onto the scene while the ball is loose. Now, seeing as it's a loose ball situation, she should be marking up one of those players. Well, she may have actually just become, when the white helmet number 3 passed the ball up, our number 2 that's behind the pack probably just became first in line for the ball. And our number 3 did not take her player past the ball, but our number 2's job is to go all out to try to keep that black helmet number 2 from picking that ball up. And doesn't look like she's doing too much to get in there to get it. So now we'll watch the white helmet number 3, who's just picked up the ball in the end zone, and she'll want to, of course, get out of the end zone and get the ball to the other end of the field. And here you can probably see the black player turned over the back of our player, but we're watching the white player who is crossing over the back of the black player now. So I don't think she had 4 feet of clearance on that crossover, and here she crosses over again. I don't think she has 4 feet of clearance for this crossing. Of course, none of those penalties are called, and she makes her way up to the 30-yard line, goes for a bounce, and doesn't collect her bounce. And once it's come out of her racket on the bounce, it's become a loose ball. Of course, she's first in line for it until she passes it up. But when she's first in line for it, she should be going all out to make sure that black helmet number 1 also does not pick up the ball. She kind of lucks out because she didn't prevent that player from picking it up, but they miss it anyhow. So once she's passed it up and it's a loose ball situation, she should be marking up a player to keep from getting the ball. She's kind of in an unusual situation here. If she could go sideways up against the black helmet number 2, that would be okay. If she has to turn around to go back to him, she shouldn't go after him. But it looks to me like she could just come around and get up against him sideways and keep him from picking up the ball. And she does try to go for him, but she does it by turning her horse toward him instead of going sideways up against him. And the turning her horse back toward him is not the way to do that. So here she has another opportunity to get up against him sideways, but she doesn't do that, swings at his racket and gets behind, and he bobbles the ball and loses the ball. I don't think she actually hit his racket, but it would have been more appropriate for her to just get right up against him.
Takes it up for herself. Oh, couldn't quite get to it. Looks like it could be a steal. No, Jennifer's going down for the Lone Star team. Jennifer's in there for cleanup. Jennifer looking for some help. Throws it off to Olivia. Now Olivia's headed down the field, and she's not wasting any time. She's kicking that little pony into gear. They're looking for a connection with Grace. Grace is up there in the area waiting for the connection. It's up. Oh, little.
First, we'll watch the white helmet number 2. Not on there. She is on the screen. Her number 3 taking the ball out of the area. Our number 2's job is to be available for a pass and stay away from the middle, and it looks like she is doing that. And then after her player passes it up, she's first in line for the ball, and there's no opposition, so she just casually picks the ball up. Now that our number 2 is carrying the ball, of course she wants to go to the left of the screen, and right now she doesn't have any pressure to be worried about yet. So as the defenders come up, she turns her non-stick side toward them, so keeps them away from her racket, and that's a wise thing to do. And she doesn't need to throw it yet because there's nobody coming pressuring her stick side, but she should be evaluating where her teammates are in case she needs to or decides to throw it. So just hanging out with nobody on her stick side is fine. She sees her teammate there away from all the other players and elects to pass it over to her, and that's fine too. She makes a good pass, and that player gets it. Now she would have to be going toward her ball carrier to mark up any of those players, so she should be hanging out away from the pack and behind and being available for a pass. So when our player comes back on the screen, she should be hanging out behind the pack. Here she comes on the screen, and she is available for a pass. The ball carrier has the number 1 also available, but our number 2 was doing the correct thing again, being available in case the ball carrier needed or wanted to throw it to her. Okay, now we'll watch the number 3, who's just taken the, I guess there's a penalty throw out of the area. She's overridden the ball, and she didn't keep that player that was next to her from riding past the ball also. So she really didn't do her job this time. But that player doesn't pick it up anyhow. And after she's passed it up, she should be marking up another player until she's first in line for the ball. And it looks like she may actually be marking up that player until her teammate does pick up the ball. And now, once her teammate has the ball, in order to mark up either of those black helmets in front of her, she'd have to be moving toward her ball carrier. So she should not move toward her ball carrier to mark up either one of those. She should hang out away from the pack, being available for a pass. She's still doing the right thing, hanging out away from the pack, still being available for a pass, and asking for a pass, and the ball carrier does throw it to her. Now, she's not really under pressure from that player on her right yet, but she needs to make a move kind of immediately to keep out of reach of that player that's already on her racket side. So she takes off. I think she stays out of reach of that player's racket. That player does swing, but I don't think she is within reach anyhow. And she stays out in front of her, I think, the rest of this play. Now she has somebody coming up on her stick side, and it looks like he's not trying for her. He's just running parallel with her, maybe to pass her up and get in front. I don't know why, but it seems like he's not within swinging range where he is now, and he's seems to be continuing on past her. But she checks up. I'm not sure if she had 4 feet of clearance when she pulled across that player, but gets the pass off.
Her horse took a really nice turn, but it was a little late after she'd already hit the ball out. And Grace ends up with the ball. Grace carried the ball up the hill. Grace is the number 1. She can score, but she's going to have to bounce the ball when she gets up to the 30. Bounce.
Okay, first we'll watch the white helmet number 2. His closest to the camera was now is getting almost behind the telephone pole. But her teammate has just picked up the ball, and the person we're watching is directly behind the telephone pole. She could move away from her ball carrier to mark up the player that is on the left of the screen, but she should not go toward the player that's to the right of the telephone pole. So she should either go pick up that player that's to the left of the screen or hang out away from the ball carrier to be available for a pass. And it looks like she's taking the hangout choice, and now that her ball carrier has gotten in front of her, she would have to be going toward her ball carrier to even mark up that player on the left. So now the only appropriate thing for her to do is hang out away from the pack and be available for a pass. So it looks like she's doing exactly the correct thing. So she's still good. She shouldn't be so directly behind them. She should be hanging out more to the center of the field. But she was still okay. So now we watch the white helmet number 3, who's just coming on the screen from the right. Her teammate has just got the ball. She could be angling away from her ball carrier to mark up the player to her right. So that would be an appropriate thing to do. And she could, if she actually didn't try to do that, and running up, I guess, to mark up that player on the ball carrier's left is not the correct thing to do. She's getting in the pack. She's moving toward her ball carrier to mark up that player, which is definitely incorrect. Now she starts to drift back away from the pack, which is more appropriate. And then the ball carrier gets in the end zone.